welcome to this week's NESN Patriots Podcast. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always, but remotely, by Zack Cox. Zack, how are you doing?
Not too bad. Living the self-distanced life right now. I don't think I've put on jeans in like 13 days or something like that. It's where, we got the whole home studio set up now. We just got some fancy new lights for this that are kind of blinding me, but I think are going to make us look a little better on camera here. So, just kind of living this whole new life now. It's a little bit of a change, but I mean, hasn't really slowed down anything in the NFL just yet. So we've been plenty busy.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really honestly the least different probably for us because we work from home during the off season anyway, but there's now just, for me, 2 extra humans also running around at all times, which is a little bit different, but getting used to it. And like you said, the news on the NFL front hasn't really slowed down yet, although it is tailing off a little bit, but we're entering a new world for the New England Patriots. They're going to have some new uniforms next season, and they're going to have a new quarterback. And it's certainly looking like that quarterback at this point is going to be Jarrett Stidham. He will be competing in training camp for now with Brian Hoyer and Cody Kessler. But personally, I don't know, maybe I'm just talking myself into it, but I'm a little bit excited to watch the Jarrett Stidham era in New England. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. He was a 4th-round pick last year, but he showed some promise in his college days, in the preseason last year. So I don't know. I'm personally just curious to see how this goes for the Patriots.
I am too. I know a lot of Patriots fans are pretty disappointed with the way the whole Tom Brady thing turned out, but for us, from a media standpoint, from a storyline standpoint, it's going to be fascinating to see who takes over for Tom Brady. And I'm with you. I do fully expect that to be Jarrett Stidham, and I think the Patriots expect that to be Jarrett Stidham unless he really just shows that he is not ready this offseason. But I liked what I saw from him last year in training camp, liked what I saw from him last year during the preseason. And, I mean, these moves that the Patriots have made so far, or lack thereof, I guess, have shown to me that they fully expect Jarrett Stidham to be ready to start, to be ready to be a starting NFL quarterback in week 1 of this season. Now, whether that happens, who knows? Maybe they'll play it a little bit slow with him, put a guy like Hoyer in there for the first couple of weeks. That's definitely a possibility. But I think the fact that they haven't brought in any big name kind of career quality starting quarterback this offseason, I think that really points to the fact that they have at least enough faith in Jarrett Stidham that he can be potentially the next guy.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to go into next season with Brian Hoyer as your starting quarterback. I don't really remember when the last time Brian Hoyer was an actual starting quarterback was, but I mean, he's never been that guy for multiple years at the time. Houston or Cleveland or something like that. It's been a while, and he's always just sort of been a pseudo starter wherever he is, as that gap between the last guy and the next guy. So I certainly don't think that you want that to be him. Cody Kessler is another guy with starting experience, but obviously Jarrett Stidham is the one who's got the most potential on the Patriots roster right now. I wrote something this morning, I think it was Thursday morning, about how the Patriots offense could change with Jarrett Stidham under center. And this is a negative that I'm trying to turn into a positive. But when Tom Brady was the Patriots quarterback, you did not want to take the ball out of his hands. And obviously there were special circumstances where the Patriots did take the ball out of his hands and had Julian Edelman or Danny Amendola or James White or someone else throwing passes. Now that you've got someone who's not named Tom Brady at quarterback, I think that there could be more creativity shown in the Patriots offense this year, whether that is, having Julian Edelman or Mohamed Sanu or someone else throwing passes, or bringing in a guy like Jalen Hurts or Lynn Bowden or someone else who can do some Taysom Hill-like things in the Patriots offense. There's also the aspect that Jarrett Stidham is just a more mobile quarterback than Tom Brady. So you weren't seeing Tom Brady run bootlegs. You weren't seeing Tom Brady run options. I think that those things will be an option with someone like Jarrett Stidham, who he's got average mobility for a starting quarterback, but he's not Tom Brady. He's not a statue back there. So I'm curious to see just how much the Patriots offense changes with a guy like Jarrett Stidham under center, rather than having that GOAT Tom Brady, where you basically just want to keep running the same offense that the Patriots were running for 20 years.
Yeah, to preface this with, I don't think that Jarrett Stidham will be a better quarterback than Tom Brady this season. It's possible. I am not expecting that, but having Jarrett Stidham in there instead of Tom Brady gives the Patriots some flexibility, I think, as you just alluded to. I think it'll help some of their younger receivers maybe get up to speed a little bit more, because Jarrett Stidham is not going to come in with this is how I do things, and if you don't do things this way, I'm never going to look your way, which was the case with Tom Brady for a lot of times, and really kind of, especially in the last couple of years, narrowed the pool of players that the Patriots really had to choose from at those skill positions. I think it's going to kind of open things up a little bit more. It might even open things up from a roster construction standpoint. Because I was writing about this the other day about how the Patriots have not addressed their need at tight end yet this offseason. And it's always been the Patriots, for them to be fully successful, they need a top-level, two-way, well-rounded tight end that can block and can catch and can really be a factor in every facet of the offense. Maybe that isn't the case anymore. I mean, still think they're going to need to do better than what they have right now with Matt LaCosse and Ryan Izzo, but maybe in a post-Tom Brady world, tight end just kind of takes on less importance in this Patriots offense. Maybe they move away from that toward a more wide receiver-based passing game, or toward a running game that relies less on having a really high-quality blocking tight end. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but that's something that you could see kind of change in Josh McDaniels' scheme and whole plan moving forward, now that you take that kind of number one top guy out of that system. I think you could definitely see a lot of things get switched up this season, which from our perspective is going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, I even wrote that this morning as well, that usually you do look for that Rob Gronkowski-esque guy, or that Ben Watson, or that Daniel Graham, someone who could handle the blocking role and the receiving role. Maybe we see the Patriots draft a Bryson Hopkins, some sort of undersized tight end who's more of a big wide receiver than a tight end, or maybe they just, roll with right now they've got more fullbacks on their roster than tight ends. They've got 3 fullbacks and only 2 tight ends on their roster right now. So maybe they lean a little bit more towards the running game with a fullback rather than a tight end in there. Maybe they go with, I don't know. I mean, Josh McDaniels can get as creative as he possibly wants at this point, now that he's not relying on Tom Brady as that starting quarterback. So like you said, I don't think that it's a net positive for the Patriots to take Tom Brady out of there. But I personally find it interesting that the Patriots now might be able to be a little bit more creative, might be able to get a little bit more versatile on their offense just by having someone who's a little bit more mobile, who's not quite as stuck in that system as Tom Brady was. And as you mentioned, I think that it might help some of the younger wide receivers as well. I think it probably hurts someone like Julian Edelman because he no longer has a quarterback that he can read that player's mind. But for people like Jacoby Myers or N'Keal Harry or maybe even Mohamed Sanu or any other tight ends or wide receivers that the Patriots bring in, now everyone's kind of starting at the same level. They don't have that guy like Tom Brady who's known the system for 20 years, and then everyone else is trying to play this impossible game of catch up to a quarterback that you're never going to catch up to. So now everyone is starting on the same level. I think ultimately, like I said, that's probably a net negative, but it could help some of the players that are around Tom Brady or around Jarrett,
especially just the way that this offseason is going to be constructed, which, I mean, basically might not even exist. There might not be an off-season program this year. There might not be OTAs. There might not be minicamp. And you could even see training camp start late, depending on how all of this coronavirus stuff plays out over these next few months. And I think it's going to be in that perspective, it really makes sense what the Patriots have done at quarterback so far this offseason. Because if you bring in Andy Dalton, he's not going to be able to throw with any of his Patriots teammates, not going to be able to really sit down and hash things out with Josh McDaniels, not going to be able to get on the field with anybody for months. I mean, that's something that Tom Brady is currently dealing with in Tampa Bay, which he talked about a lot on his introductory conference call. So the Patriots, by sticking with Jarrett Stidham and Cody Kessler, both guys that were in New England for all or most of last season, and then bringing back Brian Hoyer, who has as much experience in this offense as basically anybody not named Tom Brady, and who was here last summer, so has worked with guys like Jacoby Myers and guys like N'Keal Harry and a lot of the current Patriots players. You've got 3 guys that obviously all 3 of them can use as many reps as they can. None of them are surefire lockdown starting quarterbacks, guys that you feel 100% confident just sticking out there in week 1. But the fact that the learning curve is going to be much, much shallower for them than it would be for even somebody like a Cam Newton or an Andy Dalton or a Jameis Winston that has a lot more starting experience but wouldn't really know what he's doing coming into this Patriots offense.
We'll talk about some of the Patriots additions that we haven't talked about on last week's podcast in a little bit, but you mentioned the Tom Brady conference call. Let's get into that a little bit. Interesting conference call. I think that the setting was obviously a little bit strange because of the coronavirus pandemic. That introductory news conference couldn't happen. So Tom Brady was on a phone, Bruce Arians, Jason Light, and then all of the media members. And I think that it probably would have felt a little bit different if all of this was in person. I think that maybe you would have been able to see a little bit more excitement out of Tom Brady, but I described him as a bit reserved in the conference call. He didn't really want to get into any details about why he decided to join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or why he decided to leave the New England Patriots. And quite frankly, there's only so much you can read off of a person's voice. But to me, I didn't feel like he felt that excited about the Buccaneers situation. Maybe that was just because he was trying to, keep everything at bay and try to not show his feelings too much. But there was no real excitement about the team he was joining, but there was also no details about the team that he was departing from.
Yeah, he seemed a little resigned to me almost.
Right.
It's kind of goes back to what we talked about last week, that Tom Brady didn't choose to leave the Patriots to join the Buccaneers. He chose to leave the Patriots and then joined the Buccaneers.
Right.
So I don't think he personally is totally sold on how things are going to go in Tampa Bay. I think this is kind of a situation where he's like, well, I left New England. I didn't want to be there. I guess this is the best option. Like, let's see what happens. Let's see how it goes. And he does have a pretty solid infrastructure in place down there with all of the talent, all of the talent they have on offense, and with Bruce Arians, who's about as good a coach as any to work with if you're a top tier quarterback like this. But I mean, I just thought it was interesting that Tom Brady said, what was it? He said get up to speed 7 different times during his conference call. He basically mentioned during every single response was about, hey man, I'm starting from the bottom. Like I need to get to know all these players. I need to get to know this system. I get to kind of just gel with all these new people that I've never played with before and never been on a field with before. Obviously that some of that has to do with just the restrictions that are in place with COVID-19 right now, where he's not able to get onto the field with any of his teammates for a while. But he sounded a little, I don't know if tentative is the wrong word, but he didn't seem overly excited and overjoyed to be with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know. That was the sense that I got from him, at least.
I was right there with you. I heard other people describe him as nervous. I'm not sure if I would go that far on it, but I mean, there's almost no point in even talking about what he said about the Patriots because he almost said nothing. The only thing that he would directly address is that he made the decision to leave the Patriots on Monday night before talking to Robert Kraft. Then he met with Robert Kraft. They called Bill Belichick, and it seems like they called Jonathan Kraft as well. The intention for Tom Brady to leave was known that night, and apparently that's when Tom Brady made the decision. But he really kind of took the high road while talking about the Patriots, while talking about Robert Kraft. He didn't, he thanked and said all the right things about his teammates and his coaches and everyone else, but really short on details as far as anything that was surrounding the Patriots in that conference call. And there were 3 or 4 different questions about the Patriots on there as well.
Yeah, that was one of the few benefits of the setup that this conference call was on. The fact that it wasn't a introductory press conference in Tampa Bay. I mean, I'm sure there would have been a few New England reporters who made the trip down for that, but we were able to ask him a few direct questions about his departure from New England, even though, as you mentioned, he didn't really answer them. It seems like everybody involved in this is sort of taking the high road, except for maybe you could say Robert Kraft with his kind of media tour last week, where he basically put all the blame on Tom Brady. But I mean, from Bill Belichick's statement that he released last week and to everything that Tom Brady said, he basically said he has nothing but love and respect for Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick and the Patriots organization, says he'll always be a Patriots fan. So he's definitely he wasn't going to throw any stones at his old organization.
As I mentioned earlier, the Patriots are going to be debuting new uniforms this offseason, which were described as minor changes to the uniforms. I wasn't sure if new uniforms meant a new alternate uniform or if it meant a change to their main uniform. But I'm curious to see how all of this goes with the Patriots. I think that I personally would have preferred wholesale changes, with Tom Brady now gone, I would have loved to see them, either change over to red or change over to royal blue or do something drastic. But obviously the Patriots, when they were designing these uniforms, didn't know whether or not Tom Brady was going to be back next year or not. So they probably didn't want to overhaul everything if that same dynasty was going to be in place. But I don't know. I'm curious to see what all of this means. If it's going to be a return to white helmets, if it's just going to be very, very, very minor changes. I think that would be a worst case scenario for me, is if you can barely even notice what the changes they're making are.
Yeah, that would be worst case scenario. I also wouldn't be thrilled if they did noticeable changes, but nothing super crazy. Because I feel like they're going to have a full uniform overhaul at some point within the next couple of years. I think they want to kind of transition from the Brady era to whatever's next. I think bringing back the red would be smart. I think bringing the Bledsoe Blues back in some capacity would be smart. But I think you're probably going to end up looking at this like next year or two as like 20 years down the line, looking back, like, oh yeah, remember when they had those like the normal Navy jerseys, but they kind of had the weird piping on them, and like it was slightly changed, and then they just threw them away 2 years later. I think we're going to look back on this next few years the way that you look back on those early Drew Bledsoe jerseys with the mismatched colors and all the weird stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they're mixing it up. It's their look is getting a little stale, having been in place for so long. So a little bit of change is definitely going to be good. But I would like to see a full clean sweep.
What are some other teams that have gone through sort of minor uniform changes? I guess the Lions did a few years ago, and they added black to their uniforms. And
they added black, and then they took the black away, and now they just have the gray. Other teams have done it. I think the Falcons have done it, where they put in their black. They changed their primary jerseys to black, and now they only wear red. Like some other teams have done some. Obviously, the Rams had those terrible combos a year or two ago with the white face masks, and
that's a worst case scenario.
Those were horrendous. But it's exciting. Apparently there's a ton of new NFL jerseys coming out this offseason. So I think 7 teams are either tweaking their logo, tweaking their jersey, or tweaking both. The Patriots, according to these reports, are not tweaking their logo, so the Flying Elvis lives on. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I hope they do something a little bit creative. I would like some noticeable change.
I would as well. Even if it meant going to, their color rush jerseys full time or doing something like that. But let's go over some of the Patriots additions that we haven't really talked about yet. The full list is wide receiver Demare Bird, it's Demare.
I think it's Demir
Bird.
But I could be wrong.
You should probably know how to say that. Defensive tackle Bo Allen, safety Adrian Phillips, fullback Danny Vitale, quarterback Brian Hoyer, who we already discussed, linebacker Brandon Copeland, and safety Cody Davis. I know that this isn't the most exciting group of additions, and some of the guys that they lost, like Jamie Collins, Kyle Van Noy, are bigger names, but I could see a few of these guys making a pretty decent impact on the Patriots this season. My guess, just right off the top, would be that maybe Brandon Copeland makes the biggest impact. He's the guy who's got the best chance to potentially start out of that group, I would say, either him or Bo Allen. But Copeland's a guy who's played outside linebacker. He's played inside linebacker. He's got that 6'3", 260-pound frame that the Patriots like. So I could potentially see him, starting next to Dante Hightower and Juwan Bentley next season. That's not completely out of the realm of possibility for me.
Yeah, Copeland's definitely a familiar face. Spent the last 2 seasons with the Jets. I think he's a versatile guy. He can play in a couple different spots, but seems like his best spot would be in that type of Kyle Van Noy role, on the edge. I know Greg Williams moved him to more of an inside linebacker, off the ball type guy this past year, and he was fine, but he made much more of an impact as a pass rusher in that previous role. So he's definitely a guy that I think, especially given the current shallowness of the Patriots linebacking core, that could definitely step in there right away and compete for a starting job. Same goes for Bo Allen, because he's basically a 1-for-1 replacement for Danny Shelton at this point, as that nose guard that can play is better off in the run game than the pass game. Probably be a 2-down player, but can get in there and kind of hold his own against the run down there. I think Adrian Phillips is also a guy that could make a pretty significant impact this season, because he's the kind of player that the Patriots don't really have. He's a very Patriots-esque player with the versatility, the ability to play multiple positions, plays a lot on special teams too. He's been really complimented a lot for his intelligence, his football IQ, but he's basically can play anything from linebacker all the way back to free safety. He doesn't play free safety all that much, so he'll probably be a sort of pseudo Patrick Chung type. But he's definitely a guy that, I mean, he was an all-pro special teamer 2 years ago, had 90 tackles. He's a very solid player. I know he's coming off a broken arm, so he didn't really do a whole lot this past season, but he's definitely a guy that I can see making a pretty quick impact.
The funniest reaction to me has been about the Danny Vitale signing. He's a athletic fullback. He ran like a 4.6 40, but from the way that some people are talking about him, they're acting like he's going to be the next, like, I don't even know, Kyle Juszczyk or something. And that's not the player that he's been. That would be a major surprise if he made a major impact as a pass catcher or a runner. But there are some questions about James Devlin's status next season after missing most of last season with a neck injury. So potentially Danny Vitale could be the Patriots starting fullback next season, or he could be cut in training camp. There's really no telling.
I do think that Danny Vitale, I think some of the predictions out there are a little over aggressive, but I do think that with Josh McDaniels here and the way that he likes to use guys in different ways, I do think that he can make a more significant impact in the passing game than he has at any point in his career. I mean, going back to his the Packers used him a little bit in that area last year, and he had some success. But going back to college, when he played at Northwestern, he was a super back, quote unquote, was his position, which is basically a tight end, fullback, H-back hybrid type thing. And he had over 1,000 receiving yards. I think he led Northwestern in receiving one year. He only had like 330 yards receiving, but that's a Northwestern type offense. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that Josh McDaniels is going to find some creative ways to get him involved. I mean, he'll put James Devlin out in the passing game every once in a while. Devlin will end up with 3 or 4 catches each season. So I think that's a guy who can definitely maybe grow his role a little bit this season. But the biggest question, as you mentioned, that kind of got raised by this signing was, is James Devlin even going to be healthy enough to play this season? I mean, he's coming off a neck injury. He's an older guy. A neck injury is always a kind of a dicey situation there. And Vitale is not an undrafted free agent. He's a guy that's been a starting fullback on multiple teams. So the fact that they went out and got a guy with that level of experience kind of shows that there might be some concerns about James Devlin.
And there are. I mean, James Devlin doesn't even know if he can play next season. That decision ultimately will be made by the Patriots after he undergoes a physical in the Patriots facility. And there's no telling when that's going to happen because no one other than trainers and some IT people are even allowed in Gillette Stadium right now. So I think that's why they made that signing, is that they don't know whether James Devlin can play next season yet until they actually look at that neck. So, and I as good as James Devlin is, I think that the way that they've used James Devlin, it would make a lot more sense to have a guy who has Danny Vitale's athleticism in that role, because I mean, there's only so much that James Devlin could do as a pass catcher because of his lack of speed and athleticism. When you do get a guy in there who does have a little bit more athleticism, maybe that position can be opened up a little bit. But, we just talked about all the additions. We talked about some of the subtractions. So now the biggest question is, what are the biggest remaining needs on the Patriots at this point, as we're sitting here on March 26th? The draft is about a month away. And the very obvious one is at tight end. We mentioned that earlier. Ryan Izzo and Matt LaCosse are the only players at that position right now. And that's certainly not enough. I don't think that either one of those guys proved to be a starting caliber player next season. So whether it's by signing a guy like Delaney Walker or Jordan Reed, or drafting someone like Adam Troutman or Cole Kmet, that's the biggest need that they have right now. And I think it's putting a lot of Patriots fans on edge that the Patriots haven't addressed it yet. Now, for the second, third, or fourth offseason in a row? I mean, they knew that Rob Gronkowski was going to be retiring. They didn't do anything before he retired. Rob Gronkowski retired. All they did was bring in Ben Watson and Matt LaCosse. Rob Gronkowski's been retired for an entire season now, or entire year now, and they still haven't done anything there yet. And I can't blame them that much for not spending too much money on Austin Hooper or trading for Hunter Henry, or even a guy like Tyler Eifert. Got way too big of a contract for the type of player that he is at this point. But I think that it would ease some concerns with Patriots fans if the Patriots did something at that position before the draft.
Absolutely. But honestly, they're running out of options. Like there really aren't too many candidates left out there that would really excite anybody. You mentioned probably the two of them that are the that are guys that have performed at a high level in the past, and Delaney Walker and Jordan Reed, and both of those guys have major injury concerns. So it would not be surprising if it takes them a while to sign, given all the physical restrictions at this point. I mean, going down that list, the only other tight end free agent tight end who has even had kind of moderate success in the past is Charles Clay, and he's been really bad for the last 2 years as a pass catcher. A guy like Ricky Seals-Jones is another. What's that?
Jeff Swaim is another possibility.
Jeff Swain's on there. Ricky Seals-Jones, Blake Bell. Who else is even on there? Eric Tomlinson and Lance Kendricks, old Patriots friends. There's really not that much left out there. So unless they decide to swing a trade for somebody, one of the trades that you brought up before, like an Evan Ingram type thing, then there really isn't a ton of exciting prospects out there for them until the draft. And then going into the draft, that makes it their absolute number one priority. And I mean, it was probably in their top 2 or 3 priorities last year, and they just chose to basically not even bother with it. And we see how that turned out for them. So that I agree with you. That is their clear number one. Clear number one need right now after waves 1 and 2 of free agency or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and we could see them double up, similar to how they did in 2010 when it was Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. They did still have a guy like Algie Crumpler that season, but they actually got a decent amount of production out of Gronkowski and Hernandez as rookies. So potentially we could see the same thing happen this year if the Patriots did double up there. I recently did a mock draft where I had them taking Cole Kmet and Adam Troutman. It took a couple trades down into the second round for that to happen. I think that's really kind of the sweet spot for drafting a tight end. Patriots don't currently have a second round pick, so maybe that they will trade down to try to double up at that position. But beyond that, I'd say that linebacker and wide receiver are probably the other 2 big needs on this team right now. We mentioned that they got Brandon Copeland, but he's really only filling in for the losses of Jamie Collins, Elena Roberts, and Kyle Van Noy. Dante Hightower and Juwan Bentley also are starting caliber players, but they definitely need at least one more guy in there. And a wide receiver, I think they could get by with what they have, which is basically Julian Edelman, N'Keal Harry, Mohamed Sanu, Jacoby Myers, and Gunnar Olszewski. But ideally, you'd like to see someone other than Damiere Byrd brought in to compete with that group, whether that is as a high draft pick or someone who's still available out there in free agency. But even the free agent options at this point are kind of running thin.
Yeah, it would make sense for them to bring in at least one wide receiver from this draft class, just because it is so deep and it is expected to be so kind of flush with potential impact players. I still don't know if I agree with them drafting a wide receiver in the first round. I think it's going to be a better idea or better use of their resources to get one in the 3rd or 4th round. But I definitely think that is in their best interest. And also, they no longer have to worry about the Tom Brady hates rookie receivers aspect of this whole thing. So I think that might alter their thought process a little bit there. But overall in the draft, I'd honestly be kind of surprised if they kept their 23rd overall pick. I think this is they're in a very good situation to trade down, get a second, maybe 2 seconds in there, because that's such a big gap from 23 all the way down to 87 that they have right now. I think it would be in their best interest to get at least 1 or 2 additional day 2 picks in there. I know fans aren't going to like it sitting around the entire day 1 of the draft, just waiting for them to pick and then having them trade out. But unless there's someone that falls to there that they're really, really interested in, I think it would be in their best interest to trade down.
So the Indianapolis Colts, Miami Dolphins, Houston Texans, Chicago Bears, Baltimore Ravens, and Seattle Seahawks all have 2 second-round picks. And a lot of those teams are teams that the Patriots are either very familiar with or have traded with before. I mean, they've traded with the Colts in recent years. The Dolphins and Houston Texans both have former Patriots assistants or GMs in there. The Chicago Bears, I believe they've traded with before, I think they actually have a Bears draft pick this year. The Ravens, I think they won't be so hesitant to trade with, and they've traded with the Seahawks in the past as well. So those are all teams where they can trade their first-round pick for 2 second-round picks, or there's some teams late in the first round who have a late first-round pick and a late second-round pick, like the Green Bay Packers or Kansas City Chiefs, who they could also trade with to stockpile, more picks or to get into the second round. But that's really the key, I think, for the Patriots, is to somehow get into the second round one way or the other, because that's where, as I said, they're probably going to be, getting that future tight end or future tight ends. But draft is still a month away, and we don't even frankly know if it's going to happen.
On that note there, what do you think about the proposal that Adam Schefter floated out there of the 7-night draft where there's one round per night?
Sure, I guess. I mean, we're going to need to kill time at some point this offseason. And
from a content perspective, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't hate that. Then, because part of the problem with the draft, and we're probably running a little bit long here, but I mean, looking at that 6th and 7th round right now, the Patriots have 4 6th-round picks and 2 7th-round picks. Like those 4 6th-round picks, it's going to be impossible to write about all those guys in that short of a time span. So at least if you break that up, then you don't have that, you're not thinking about that during a 4-hour day or 8-hour day when you're dealing with the 3rd day of the draft. I don't know. I don't hate it. I think it's kind of silly, but I certainly, it would make things a little bit easier on us, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure people wouldn't complain about, I guess that might not technically be live sports, but it's as close as anybody's going to get at this point.
For sure. But yeah, it's sort of a weird offseason that, quite frankly, we don't know if the season's going to start on time, if there's going to be a season, but I feel like we're all just sort of trying to plow ahead as best we can and prepare as if there is going to be a season, because it's just easier to work that way right now.
Yep. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think that will do it for this week's NESN Patriots podcast. We'll probably be back next week to discuss everything else that's been going on with the Patriots. But as I said, that will do it for this week. Keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow Zach on Twitter at Zack Cox NESN. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed. And we will be back. So talk to you guys soon.